Hey, this is Dr. Jeffrey Slocum coming to you with the Legion of Chiropractic. And today we've got, over the next three sessions, we're going to be working with Dr. John Davila. Dr. John Davila, he's going to go over three things successful high-volume offices have in common. First, which is the next three, is first, they understand what the SWAN teaches them under the surface. Two, they don't concern themselves with unjust laws. They focus on being compliant instead of justifying non-compliance. Very important. And three, they see through people and the three R's of failed relationships, of regret, resistance, and revenge. So Dr. John has come up to Maine and worked with our four offices. We feel so much better now that we understand what it means to be compliant. We have a compliance officer, and we have a team with John's team helping us to make sure that we can focus on what we do best, which is building great relationships, providing great services, getting to know our communities better, and just celebrating chiropractic. So, Dr. John, thanks for being on with us today. I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor now.
Jeff, thanks. That's an intro. I hope I can live up to that. Thanks.
You can.
Well, everyone, thanks for being with me here today and with the Legion of Chiropractors. The issue here that we really want to discuss is how did we get here? And what I mean by how did we get here, I mean how do we end up in a position where we can be a high-volume practice? Now, the reason why I'm going to start with this is because what I've found over the years of doing what I've been doing over the last 5.5 years of this program itself, we've had over 750 customizations and clients that we've worked with from a compliance standpoint. And what I found after reviewing doctors and information and practices and processes, we found there's a couple things that they do and they all do consistently. Now, how we got there to find this information out isn't because I asked. It's because when we go in and, like Jeff was saying, working with their clinic, it's all about reverse engineering. Okay, so we reverse engineer everything, and everything we're talking about, the SWAN, unjust laws, the issue with regret, revenge, and resistance, all that stuff comes from the idea of reverse engineering. And so the question is, how did we get here? The answer really starts with, we get here from dealing with, doctor, what do you want to sell? Once you figure out what you want to sell, our next issue is, what is the coding? How do we deal with the fees? And then how do we deal with the notes? And the reason why I say this is because if we start with that process first, we can handle everything Jeff just talked about because we know where we need to end up. Now, it all, for me, when we talk about the SWAN and what this means, and you'll explain it, you'll understand in a second, really has everything to do with what I found when I got to a doctor's office and trying to put this in place with them. Like, okay, doc, tell me what your care plan is. From there, we'll figure out the codes. We'll figure out what you need to make money. We'll figure out all the notes. The first thing we had to do when we put this process in was actually sit down and say, hey, doc, what's your perfect practice? What is it? Tell me. And they say, oh, it's a practice full of kids, and it's a practice full of this, and a practice full of that. I'm like, okay, let's see. What is it that you're doing, though? What is it you're trying to get accomplished? Well, I'm trying to get all these things in my life accomplished, my family, my practice, my office, my staff, my friends, trying to do all these things together. And what I found was when they did all these things together, they had the same process in the rest of their life, but not in their practice. They found out exactly who they wanted to be, and they made friends like that and everything else. They reverse engineered everything, but in practice they didn't. What they did was they went out and they said, oh, I like this practice management style, and that's what I want to be. But unfortunately, the conversation you would have with an insurance company is not the same one that you have with a patient. And if you don't understand that conversation, what you should have is a conversation with a patient versus an insurance company, it's not about cash practice or anything else. What we're talking about here is the process of getting things done. Because remember, whether you're cash or insurance or anything else, the main issue you need to worry about is that you don't document to the payer, you document everything from an accounting standpoint based on the CPT code you use. So let that sink in for a second. You don't document because you're a cash practice. You document because of the code you use, because that's what's required. So when you look at the perfect practice, you say, okay, this is what I want. Now think about these people sitting here in the office, right? They want to see the doctor. What they see is this. They see a swan. Now if I ask you what is a word you would use to describe a swan as it floats across the top of the water, you'd say, oh, I think it's graceful. Because graceful is a great word. But what people don't realize is beneath the surface, the swan paddles extremely aggressively. Now, what that means is this. The patient comes in and they want to stay, pay, and refer. They don't care about anything else other than that. They don't care how much work you have to do. They don't care how much CE you have to do. They don't care how long you have to stay after work to do all those other things. All the things that you have to do in order to paddle to look graceful to the patient, they don't care about. So how do you get to be a successful practice in understanding this? Well, the answer is figuring out in advance how to paddle. Now, here's what I do know. What I do know in this whole process is that none of us, including Jeff and anyone else listening to this, actually sat there on the first day of chiropractic school like me, and I'm just like the rest of us, and said, wow, when's my first documentation course? No one ever said that. In fact, when I teach CE all around the country, no one's there to see me. No one's happy. No one walks in and goes, oh, wow, John Davila's here to teach insurance and documentation and compliance. No one says that. Why is that? Jeff, did you ever say that? When I came to see you, that wasn't the first thing you were thinking.
No. But I had gotten to, I tell you what, I had gotten to the point, John, where I'd realized that, like it or not, it needs to happen. There's no two ways about it anymore. We can't ignore it. The elephant in the room is no longer able to ignore it.
Right. So here's the beautiful part. When you put all this together, if you know how to paddle and you become efficient, the game becomes much easier. Now, here's what I tell doctors when I go to their office. They come to me and they say, hey, John, what do you think of this x-ray? And I go, I think it's a chicken bone. And they go, what do you mean chicken bone? I said, man, listen, I haven't read x-rays in 8 years, 10 years. Who cares what I think when I see a chicken bone? Well, why don't you care? Because that's not what I do anymore. That's why when I ask doctors, hey, have you ever read Medicare's policies? They're like, no, well, it makes total sense. I don't read x-rays, you don't read Medicare. So I won't tell you how to create a care plan, but I can tell you how to be able to paddle. And one of the most common problems that doctors have in paddling is trying to figure out for themselves things like this. How do I talk about the subluxation? How do I make a case like this medically necessary? What do I do about mommy, my ear hurts, or mommy, my stomach hurts? How am I able to make any type of case medically necessary? Now, I say this because this is the most common question I get that stops the doctor from moving forward. I get doctors all the time. Hey, John, how do I deal with a chiropractic patient who comes in but they don't have any complaints? What do you mean no complaints? Well, they don't have anything that's musculoskeletal. I go, got it. That's a problem. We don't want that to be a problem for us. Really what we want is to be able to understand how to be able to do this without having to think about it and slow us down. So the people that are really, really fast at this game actually figured out how to do this in advance, how to reverse engineer this entire process. So when we look at it and we say to ourselves, okay, the first thing we want to do when we look at this is we want to go from an ear infection to adjustment to the practice of medicine. That's not how it works. We don't want to do this. What we want to be able to do is say subluxation is first. The subluxation issue is first. We have to make sure we understand the subluxation is the most common thing. Now, the subluxation is great for us because we can use part exams and we use all kinds of stuff to be able to make that any condition physical. And if we can make any condition physical / musculoskeletal, then we can go on to the adjustment. Then we can practice chiropractic. If we're saying we're adjusting someone because of a symptom, that's the practice of medicine. But here's the thing. When I explain to people, hey, listen, what's really cool about this is that, there's an issue with medical necessity in here and what Medicare says. And immediately people go, oh, Medicare, I hate Medicare. Medicare is evil and everything else. That's not necessarily true. Because their definition of what medical necessity is actually embraces what we do. Now, what I'm trying to do here is make you empowered. I'm trying to make you right. Usually you sit through a compliance seminar like, oh, you're bad, you're evil, go to jail. That's not what this is. Today, this is 100% all about making you right. How do you do it? You reverse engineer it. The first thing you do is you understand what medical necessity is in order to create this process. And that's this. This is the definition according to Medicare. The patient must have a significant health problem in the form of a neuromusculoskeletal condition necessitating treatment. And the medical services rendered must have a direct therapeutic relationship to the patient's condition. Very, very simple. Hey, that's easy. I understand that. Now, what's so bad about this? Well, what's bad about it is nothing. It's what we do. The only difference between this and what an insurance company will pay for is understanding the idea of getting an improvement in the patient's function. And this is no different from understanding what the rules of the game are. And if you understand what the rules of the game are, you can play any game. So instead of a patient coming in and presenting in such a way in which you don't know how to handle it, if we just go back to the rule, we can win the game because now I can understand how to make any case fit within this. Now, I'll get doctors who go, well, I refuse to be a medical doctor and I refuse to be a back pain doctor and I'm just going to adjust the subluxation and God bless BJ Buck. Listen, what we have to understand here is that our entire game is based upon being compliant to be able to keep our license. And if we understand what these rules are, and we understand how it works, we'll actually stay safe within our own 33 principles. Now, I guarantee you, no one on this call today honestly thought we were going to talk about 33 principles when it's like John Davila, insurance, compliance, documentation, blah, 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 blah. But that is what we need to know. Why? Because if not, we end up here. Treating symptoms. This is one case that came across my desk. False Claims Act. That means fraud. Attorney General. Now, what happened here was this client called me, and she had this problem. She was treating all these things. Now, why would the Attorney General want a doctor to answer, please tell me how chiropractic can fix all of these conditions, spitting up, reflux, constipation, ear infections, crying or fussiness, fever, cough. Why would they ask that question unless the doctor wrote these down as symptoms they were trying to treat? This is what I'm talking about. If you understand from reverse side, from reverse engineering, from the very beginning all the way through to the end, and just reverse that around. Say, okay, we want to start with medical necessity and go forwards into how do we make this case, medically necessary? How do we start with an ear infection? How do we start with these things? The key to understand is it's not treating symptoms. We're not medical doctors. And the reason why I say this is because people don't understand the difference between a subluxation and a subluxation. They don't understand it. And when I talked to that doctor, she said to me, she goes, well, I talk about subluxation with my patients and I write subluxation down on my notes and blah, 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 but she didn't understand it. She didn't understand how this all works. So in order to be able to create this reverse engineering process from what we need to have to be able to make a case medically necessary, she didn't understand any of our principles. Meanwhile, she's out there saying how awesome and principled she is. Well, no, I talk about subluxation. No, but you're talking about treating the patient's symptoms. But the patient's symptoms have anything to do with subluxation. I get it, but here's the thing. Those symptoms that are not musculoskeletal should be called complicating factors. We can mention them. They can extend care. They can be things we talk about. It's not a problem. But here is where we have to make the difference to ourselves and our mind in how we speak to patients. Once again, what we say to patients is not what we would say to an insurance adjuster. Watch how this works. Subluxation and umbrella are the same exact thing. If we stand underneath this umbrella and it rains really hard, we stay dry. We stay safe. If we call the umbrella the subluxation complex, the vertebral subluxation complex, that's a beautiful thing. Why? Because the VSC becomes this all-encompassing thing that includes a neurological component. Beautiful, done. But if you look up into the umbrella, you see these ribs. You see, the ribs are not the complex. The ribs are the actual diagnosis codes that hold the umbrella open. You see, the idea of an M99 diagnosis is one of the ribs. It is not the actual umbrella itself. Meaning, when you look up into the umbrella, each rib is actually PART. Pain, asymmetry, range of motion, and tissue tonal change. This is what we talk about when we actually say to ourselves, the patient has a vertebral subluxation complex causing them, or we think is the cause of the disease, no problem at all. But that is PART, meaning pain, asymmetry, tissue tonal change, range of motion. Okay? This is what part is. Part is each one of these ribs. So when I look up into the umbrella and I see the ribs holding the fabric open, it's PART. Now, the problem that I have, and most doctors have, is they can't really explain how this works, and they can't really figure it out because they're like, well, the patient doesn't have pain. Where do I go? I go, wait a second. What if we just change the words around a little bit? What if we made it, I don't know, easy to understand? Let's use English instead of legalese with PART. What if we said it's not actually pain? What if we said it was complaint? And instead of asymmetry, what if we asked about posture? Because God knows if I asked the patient, how's your asymmetry today, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. But I said, what's your posture like? They would understand. And range of motion, we could change that to segmental motion. And then we could talk about spasm or swelling. Okay? Now, if we actually did this part exam, now we can take a patient who comes in and says, hey, listen, my child has an ear infection. Great, no problem. Let me check their spine. Why? Because I have to look for subluxation. I'm not going to adjust someone without a subluxation, as in a complex. Once I go and touch them and do an exam, an evaluation, I'm looking for, is there a complaint? Someone may be able not to tell me that. May not be able to say anything. But I can check the patient's posture. I can palpate C5 or C1 for fixation. I can check and see if that spasm is going to be there, holding the joint out of place. And if that's the case, now I've taken the complex and I've turned it into a physical manifestation of the complex itself, meaning I found each one of the ribs. And if I understand that, I can take any case where the patient comes in, that they have a subluxation, and they may have a non-neuromusculoskeletal complaint, and I could make the case medically necessary to a certain extent. I could prove the patient had some physical manifestation that was causing this issue, okay? And causing the issue meaning the complicating factor. Now, if I break all of these out, it actually becomes really simple. I could look at this and go, okay, well, if the patient had a pain complaint, got it, I have low back pain. I got it, done. Low back pain, got it. And I go into abnormal posture, got it. I go into here and I say, yeah, no problem, got it. Spasm, I go into here, I have segmental dysfunction, got it. All this different stuff. So now I have all these different things. PART all the way through, it's done. And because I have it done, it's a beautiful thing. I've checked the patient, found PART, and now I've created all these diagnosis codes in which I have goals for the patient. And because I have goals for the patient, now I can take that case and make it medically necessary. Hey, Jeff, when was the last time a patient came in and had no complaints, but you found the subluxation on them from doing the physical exam?
It happens regularly. It's not uncommon in my practice. Generally doesn't happen with I don't have a ton of people knocking down my doors, but if they're a referral from a practice member and they understand the value of chiropractic and they want to get their family checked, it happens regularly.
Exactly. But now, doesn't this process of HEART make it easier to explain to the patient why the physical component is there compared to just the VSC in general?
Well, absolutely. The big thing in working with you has been for all of our offices is that we realized that the game changed. What we thought the game used to be is that everything was dictated by symptoms. We now understand its function, right? So when, it brings it into our realm, completely into our realm and out of what, most chiropractors forever thought, well, if I'm going to take insurance, it means that I have to practice like a medical doctor. I have to talk about symptoms and I have to talk about pain and this and that. It's freeing for me to be able to talk to people about function and not have to concern myself with symptoms as much. So, yeah, you've demystified or uncomplicated this for
us. Yeah, well, thank you. And what I'm trying to get doctors to understand is this matches the way they practice.
Mm-hmm.
This matches what they do. And the sad part is I look through all the different comments that I see people post on Facebook, and they hate what they do and they hate this. What happens is they get into this, what I call button purgatory. They hit buttons on their EHR system which mean nothing to them. And all of a sudden they realize, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And then they go into the next phase, which is, well, I'm not going to do anything. And then 2 years later, they're barely taking notes, and they just don't care anymore because nothing they've ever said in a note makes sense, and they never get paid.
Hey, John, how about this? Not understanding the game, so they make up a game thinking that it's justifying something when in actuality it doesn't, right? So not understanding that the part is is what you need to accomplish. So they're just hitting this, hitting that, and hitting this, hitting that, and saying, yeah, okay, that makes this look complicated. That's good, right? And it doesn't make sense.
One of my favorite comments ever is, in the absence of understood and digested rules, people make shit up.
Right.
I'm just going to make stuff up because this is what I want to do. This is what I want it to be. No one's ever told me any different. I'm just going to have this. Okay. Then just have that. So, so what I want people to understand is you can make any case. I don't want people thinking they have to be any type of practice. They could take any patient. And if they do this, they could prove what they're doing and document it and be correct. Because the last thing I know, and Jeff, you and I have had this conversation, it's like I hate when I see chiropractors say on Facebook, oh, holding up a baby, oh, I adjusted this patient because they had an ear infection. No, you didn't. You adjusted that patient because they had a subluxation.
Right. And
that one little thing, that one little comment really fires me up because understanding this game, actually understanding what Medicare wants and the documentation and the idea of an umbrella versus the ribs holding it open, doesn't that bring you back closer to what you do on a daily basis mentally by trying to practice within the idea of what chiropractic actually is?
That's the whole point, is that we no longer have to. When you understand this, you no longer feel like you have to justify in your notes that you have to document the manifestation of a subluxation. You can document the subluxation.
Perfect. That's all I want. Now, the reason why I say that is because what we want really is we want this to create a win-win. The idea of doing it this way and understanding this game is all about how to have a win-win situation. How do you win with the patient? How do you win for your patient? See, the doctor who doesn't do this, and Jeff, I'd love to hear your answer to this one. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what he's going to say, but I'm going to ask him anyway. I'm telling you, Jeff, how many of your patients are happier when they get reimbursed?
Oh, all of them.
All of them. Yes. So what if you could take this type of case and help them get reimbursed?
Win-win.
What if you do that? Yeah, could you imagine how much happier if you could tell a patient, listen, we understand we don't have to make things up. I had this one chiropractor who's a good friend of mine. Great guy, right? Somewhere in Alabama. Great guy. Comes to me, is a super philosophical guy, loves what he does, and was so caught up in the compliance side of things, and was tied up to the point where he was like, how do I put this? Was tied up in knots even Houdini couldn't get out of. The compliance thing just made him crazy. And we've been friends for a long time. He calls me and goes, listen, I don't understand. I read all this stuff about Medicare and I read all this different stuff and everything else, and I'm either turning patients away or I'm telling them they have to pay cash, and I don't understand. I said, listen, what if you just did what you're supposed to do? What if you just went along and said, listen, here's my idea of what's supposed to happen with a subluxation. Just don't depart from that. Stay under the umbrella and stay dry. Find the subluxation, tell the patient about the complex, and adjust the patient to that extent. When those components of the subluxation are improved, then you move over to cash. But at least the patient gets some level of reimbursement. He's like, oh, that makes total sense. He calls me up a few months later. He's like, you know what the best part about this is? I'm like, what? He goes, we've increased the number of kids we see because we're not, A, giving it away, because that's what I was afraid I was going to have to do, and B, it helps the patients get reimbursed because I can take care of the medical necessity side of it. And you know what? It's no harder than dealing with any other person that I'm dealing with as far as patient goes, whether it's an adult or someone in Medicare. I go, exactly. It's the same thing. The infant is no different coding-wise than the adult. He's like, man, this made my process easier because now, once again, in order to be high volume, you have to have less steps, better processes, better procedures. And in this situation, it worked because it was the same procedure whether it was an infant, a child, an adult, or a senior. And this is how you're able to do it. Once you have this process down, you understand everything goes back to subluxation. Be proud of your 30 principles. Use them. And then from there, the game is won. And that's how you actually do it for your patients. And it's amazing how understanding the difference between a diagnosis of subluxation versus the subluxation complex, it's amazing how different the two are. And if you understand that, you actually help patients.
Yeah, it's empowering. That's the term I use, because most chiropractors that I know, and whether they admit it or not, but most chiropractors are really, if they're taking insurance, and I've always used insurance as basically a bridge. I want to bridge the gap between my community and my practice. So if people have insurance, they want to use insurance, why not let them use their insurance? It doesn't mean that you have to only accept what their insurance covers. If you know how to build a case and you know how to communicate well, they're going to pay you cash when the benefits run out, either because they should run out or because they have run out by the policy. But I think that the big key with this is chiropractors every day in offices all around the world are in fear, because doubt, uncertainty creates fear and anxiety. And who wants to walk into your practice wondering when when the hammer's going to drop? You don't. You want to be able to. You want to be able to not care whether you ever get audited, right?
Yes.
I mean, in the end, that's a much more empowered state, is to know that you're doing everything right, that you're building a case appropriately, that you're providing care that's consistent with our principles, that you're helping people bridge the gap between their medical mindset and our chiropractic philosophy and living a life that's vital and meaningful. You want all that stuff. And getting clear on this helps us do what we do best, which is love our people and serve them well.
And it doesn't take you away from who you are.
Right.
It doesn't take you don't have to be cash to be principled.
Exactly.
And that's the biggest joke. If I could get one person to understand that you can help someone with their insurance, and why? And anything I said here move anyone away from being subluxation based? No. Did it move you away from doing what you have to do? No. In fact, if you do what you're supposed to do because of the code you use, you can play any game, whether it's PI, Medicare, cash, insurance, the game's the same because the code is the same. And if you're principled about understanding how subluxation is involved in that, then who the payer is irrelevant. And that's what I want people to realize. If I can make it about subluxation, have the same process every time, if I do that, I can take it any case, whether it's an infant for an ear infection like we talked about, same process with someone with arthritis, same thing there, someone with headaches, the game is exactly the same. Take it back to the subluxation, deal with the physical component, and then promote who you are when it comes down to your own philosophy and stay with it. And that, to me, is the biggest component and what I see with doctors who are high volume and really, really doing well from a compliance standpoint. So before I go, what I want to do is this. I want people to realize that that compliance to me is really more about Brazil. And when I say Brazil, I mean, Rio. And this story to me really is about a friend of mine and what he told me where he used to live. And it was all about this thing called the Plaza. The Plaza Hotel was this beautiful, beautiful structure that was the best in Rio at the time when it was built. And then, from floor-to-ceiling windows and sunrise and sunset decks and parking and concierge and artwork and all this different stuff, one day, this beautiful building collapsed. And the reason why it collapsed is because the contractor did not use fill dirt in order to to set the footings. They actually used beach sand. Now, to me, that is a telling story. I know we started out with talking about the perfect practice, and then we want to talk about, not worrying about what other people are doing, and we want to talk about the 3 R's. But here's what we got to realize. Your practice, in order to grow, in order to be the biggest thing it can be, in order to provide for you and your family, to be able to build something that you can have a legacy for, eventually you become big enough to become a target. And what we want you to have is the best, most stable foundation ever. That way, if anyone ever comes to you from a compliance standpoint, it backs up what you do 100%. Now, we help our doctors do that with something called the audit-proof income system. We help your EHR be optimized to what you do. We look at your coding. We figure out what you're doing that way. We help you with training and support to be able to do medical necessity. We review your care plans to make sure that what you sell doesn't create an audit. We give you the ability to get discounts without having to sell a discount medical plan. And the best part is everything is referenced. Now, whether you're new in practice or a student or you've been in practice forever, I want you to think about Bambi. This is what the most important thing is about Bambi. And the reason why I say it's about Bambi is because when Bambi was born, Bambi's mother looked at Bambi and said, "Come on, we got to get up and run." Bambi said, "No, I want to stay here and float around. I want to play with the butterflies." And Bambi's mother said, "No, Bambi, we got to go." "Well, I can barely walk, and I want to see the sun." Bambi's mother said, "No, we've got to get up and go now." And Bambi said, No, I want to stay here. It's so nice here. It's so comfortable here." And Bambi's mother looked at Bambi and said, "We've got to go now." Bambi goes, "Why?" And her mother said, "Because the hunter is coming. We cannot stay here." And that is 100% why I do what I do. The insurance companies, yes, they come after you. Yes, boards come after you. Why? Because sometimes we build a practice that we think is perfect, but we put beach sand in the foundation and we don't support it correctly. And my goal for every one of you listening to this webinar is to have the most solid foundation for all of your practices. The same thing, Jeff, like we help you build certainty, builds profitability. Jeff, thanks for having me for the webinar. We'll see you next time.
John, thanks for being on, and everybody. John's an alliance member of the Legion of Chiropractic, and it's companies like Custom Chiro Solutions and John and his team that allow us to be able to provide these types of resources for you guys at little to no cost. I mean, trust me when I say this. When you become more confident, more certain, more consistent with the policies and procedures and principles that you want to practice with, your profitability goes up. Your level of happiness goes up. Your level of security goes up. And I tell you what, when you can walk into your practice and you're secure, and you know that you can focus on what you do best, which is, hugging, high-fiving, protecting corrections, civilizations, and allowing people to live their lives at their full expression that they deserve. It's a different world out there. So, John, thanks so much for being on. And, John, go ahead and just what's the website? Where do people go to find out more?
Yeah, if you want to find out more, it's real simple. You just go to customchirosolutions.com. And we'd love to go ahead and have you search out the website. If you want to find us or email us, it's info@customchirosolutions.com. If you want to give us a call, it's 800-974-3479.
Cool. And everybody, just another pitch. Dr. John's going to be down there in Playa del Carmen, Mexico with us, September 28th, 29th, and 30th, October 1st. Go to legionofchiropractic.com. Check out events. Get registered for that. Bring your team. Bring your spouse. It's a family affair. We have a great time. We spend time in the pool. We spend time on the beach. We have breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. So it's not like your average seminar, right? It's a gathering. It's a family. We have a ton of fun. We learn a lot. But you know what? Pick the brains of some of the most successful chiropractors out there when you're having breakfast. And we spend the whole weekend together. So if you want more of this great stuff, then join us in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, September 29th, 30th, October 1st. John, thanks a lot. Say hi to the team over there, and we really love having you guys with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.